Hello and welcome to this session. So in this session we're going to be talking about RAID technology, which is a storage and backup strategy when it comes to network attached storages, and we're going to get to understand how this technology works when it comes to these storage and backup strategies when it comes to our networks. Now, if you're into this kind of videos, remember to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and comment down below. Let me know what you think about the video and what topics you'd like me to talk about in the future. So let's get right into RAID. Now, storage is an important part of fault tolerance, and when I'm talking about fault tolerance, I'm talking about recovery strategies in case of disk failure or in case of a disaster in the business or at home. And these disasters will mostly lead into data loss, and data loss prevention is very important, since if it were to happen, it would have tremendous effects on businesses and even to home owners. Now, RAID is one of the best strategies when it comes to data loss prevention, and RAID stands for redundant array of independent disks. And in this setup, data is copied into multiple disks, so that in the event of failure of one disk, there will be no or a little data loss depending on the RAID technology that you're using. And there are four basic types of RAID, and we're going to go through each one of them and get to understand how each works. Let's start with the RAID 0, which is actually not considered to be RAID because it's not fault tolerant, which actually increases the probability of data loss. Now, this comes because data is not duplicated, but it's actually spread or stripped across multiple disks. This means that if one disk is damaged, then all the data in the damaged disk will be lost. This is where you basically just use a storage until one disk is full, and then you move on to the next one, and you start writing data to the next disk. And now the advantage of RAID 0 is that it is tremendous with speed, and having two disk controllers is better than one, which is the main reason for the speed in RAID 0. And this actually makes accessing of data much easier and way faster, since you have two disk controllers. Now let us talk about the next RAID strategy that we have, which is RAID 1. It is actually fault tolerant, and the data is copied to more than one disk. That is, disk 1 and disk 2 have identical copies of data. It's just duplicating data from one disk to another, so that in case of disk failure, then there is always backup on the undamaged disk. RAID 5, which is the most commonly used RAID technology today, is a technology that requires one to have 3 or more disks. And in this RAID 5, data is not duplicated but shared across multiple disks with parity, which means that data is stored in a certain disk, and then it's demarcated that I stored this data up to this point, and then the next data or the next chunk of data will be stored on another disk, demarcating that it was stored from this point to this point, so that if you had a disk failure, then it will be used to rebuild the data that you lost. Now, we were talking about parity, and parity is the demarcation that is used to note where data is stored, up to which point is data stored on this disk, and from where does it start when I go to the next disk, or to where it was stored next. Now, the disadvantage of this is that since you'd be using an equivalent of an entire disk to store parity, which are the demarcations that denote where data has been stored up to, or where it is starting to be stored, it reduces the collective amount of data that can be stored on this array of disks. And if the total disk space was 4 GB, then you'd only use 3 GB, since the 1 GB will be used to store the demarcations or the parity in between the data in the multiple disks. Now let's get into RAID 10. And RAID 10 combines RAID 1 and RAID 0. A minimum of 4 disks is required, and a set of 2 disks are mirrored using RAID 1. Then both sets of 2 disks are stripped using RAID 0. So let me explain this. So if you take, for example, you have 4 disks, which are the minimum requirement for this storage strategy, RAID 10. You have 4 disks. So disk 1 is mirrored onto disk 3. Disk 2 is mirrored onto disk 4. And then RAID 0 comes in, okay, where you now store this data as if you had not demarcated it, or you had not duplicated it. So you're going to store disk 1, disk 2, and then disk 3, disk 4. And remember that disk 3 and disk 4 have duplicate data of disk 1 and disk 2. So RAID 1 combines RAID 10 combines RAID 1 and RAID 0. Forgive me for that error. And the benefits of using RAID 10 is that you'll have a fault tolerance from RAID 1, that is, you'll have duplicate data, and the speed of RAID 0 since you have multiple disks. Now the disadvantage is that you'll only use 50% of the capacity for data storage. That is, if you have 4 disks, you'll only use 2 disks to store actual data, since the rest will just be actually backups or mirrored copies of your data. Now I believe that's it when it comes to network attached storages. Thank you for joining me on this one, and hope to see you on the next one. Thank you so much.